It's not just Gareth that suffered a humiliating crash this week. It really was nice of Liz to take some of the heat off him. But as the pound plummets and bills soar, you can always rely on football to really bring the drama. And this week, there are some scandals even Liz and Kwasi couldn't mastermind. Don't worry, listeners. The pork markets are fine. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Ruairi, and I'm joined by both of my very good friends this week.
Adam and
Andy.
Here we go, boys. Here we are. I think this might be the first time we've done two shows back to back, all of us, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. We're going to start a trend soon, no? We're going to start the trend. We're going to be more consistent, right?
Yeah. It won't last long. The form,
it won't.
We're getting into our mid-season form now. We're just a little bit of us to shake off. Indeed.
But as I say, form is temporary, class is permanent. So we might not be here so consistently, but we will always be great. Adam, how have you been this week? How are you feeling?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. Busy week again. I was in London yesterday, so doing a lot more traveling, talking around with other people for once. But yeah, pretty decent week, it has to be said. What about yours?
Not bad at all. Apart from the rainy season has arrived in Milan. It was literally, we were thinking, wow, this is a long summer. This is a very long summer. And then we had the day where it officially turns autumn and it's not stopped raining since. As I am speaking, there is lightning kicking off outside. So if my internet collapses, blame Zeus or God or whoever you believe in. It's their fault. Andy, how are you doing?
Available.
Other gods are available.
But yeah, I'm good. Just been cracking on with work and all that kind of stuff, and just catching up with all the drama.
There's plenty of it. But while we talk about work, there's three people this week who no longer have work. Look at that for a segue. And will have time to put their feet up a little bit. Three Premier League legends, all played in the same position, more or less, to varying degrees of success. And we're going to go by one. I'm going to go, Andy, who would you want to talk about first and say farewell to?
Well, let's say farewell to Jolobi Mikel. He started off his career signing for two clubs at once with Manchester United and Chelsea. I think that resulted in Chelsea having to pay United like 12-30 million quid or something like that. To be fair, he was a very, very serviceable squad member for a number of years with the Chelsea setup. I think he was one of those players that multiple managers relied on him because he was happy to be part of the squad, didn't necessarily expect to start every week. And, a bit like, the John O'Shea's and, those kind of people. He was an important member there. I think for Nigeria as well, he plays more of an attacking midfielder. He was and generally speaking, was quite good for them.
He was very good. He
always need to up his game when it came to playing for Nigeria, probably because he was playing maybe a bit further forward. So, I think he's had a very... you'll have a career that you'd probably be reasonably happy with.
I'd be pretty happy with the two Premier Leagues, Champions League, Europa League, African Cup of Nations. Winning anything with your country is huge, right?
Yeah.
I think it is weird. Like you kind of touched upon it. I think his most defining moment is like not so good they named him twice, so good they signed him twice. Like it's the defining moment of his career that he signed for 2 clubs at once. And I remember all the furore about it and like the absolute like this guy's going to be the next world, like 2 huge clubs fighting over him. Like, Adam, what do you remember of that? That's all I think of. When
I remember that vividly. He was a 15-year-old that was playing for Lyn in Norway, and there was so much hype around him because the fact was he was so young but had all of the ability. And I think obviously we saw Mikel at Chelsea before that point, so they kind of saw him or earmarked him as the replacement, right? But obviously Man United went in there early. Ferguson saw some talent in him, decided to sign him up, and then decided to cash in at the same time. So I don't know. You could argue that Fergie didn't do too badly out of it.
I think it's pretty clever, to be fair, buying a player and selling them for a profit before they even make an appearance. It's pretty Fergie, I think, quite wily. But next, Adam, I'm going to let you pick the next of the 3 that we can talk about. Who are we going to talk about?
I think we've got to bring the banter guy himself, and that is Fabian Delph. If there's anything that kind of summarizes his career, is that moment where Kevin De Bruyne is doing the kind of video, I think it is, for Snapchat at the time, and he's just looking at the screen placidly, and Kevin De Bruyne goes, "You're going to speak? Are you going to speak?" Like it's just
it's a video. Say something,
him up, doesn't it? It's he probably doesn't even know he's retired himself right now. He's probably still thinks he's a footballer, to be fair. But he's done quite well considering he was a young spark coming from the Leeds Academy. Managed to get some big moves along the way. And as we talked offline, he managed to get 2 Premier League titles. So he hasn't done too badly, has he? Considering he was mainly played as a left back for that period as well. But yeah, phenomenal career for someone that probably maybe could have done more, but
I feel like definitely more was expected of him. I think when he first came through, as you said, I did see one of my tweets of the week was there's an Everton account I didn't know it existed, which was days until Fabian Delph's contract expired, and they posted. Now I'm not into Marvel films. Now the big purple guy, can't remember his name in the Marvel films, but they showed. Right. They had the video of him looking at the sun.
Oh, Thanos,
with the sun coming over and him sitting down, finally resting. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. So some people are happier that he's retired than others, maybe. But the last one we're going to talk about is arguably the one who had the best career, maybe. I would say the one who was the best player of the 3. I'm going to put my neck on the line, maybe. And we're going to talk about the Brazilian Ramires. And I think... we were talking just before we hit record. It was weird that he kind of headed to China in his peak years. And I think it kind of took away, people forgot how good he was and how key he was to that Chelsea team in the Premier League. Of course, big part of the Champions League winning campaign with that beautiful goal against Barcelona, which he's now got tattooed on him. I think I saw that on his Instagram. But he also won. He won everything. The Premier League, he won the FA Cup, Champions League, Europa League. Copa Libertadores with Palmeiras, won the Confederations Cup with Brazil. You've won loads of things. What are your memories of Ramires as a player? I'm going to go for you, Andy, first.
I think it was that chip against Barcelona. I think that was his defining moment, a very exceptional goal. I think he was always very good box-to-box midfielder. He always got up and down the pitch really well. Very tenacious presence, which in that, that obviously that second era of when Jose come in and the various interim managers he had in that sort of time, he was a good presence for them. So I think he certainly left Europe probably a couple of years earlier than he probably needed to be honest. But I know at the time. The Chinese clubs backed by the government were throwing some absolutely ludicrous sums of money at players because it wasn't just him that went over. His teammate Oscar went over. I think it was something like $400,000 a week or something.
Hulk
like
went
that
as well at that point.
Hulk, quite a few.
Graziano Pella as well.
Yeah,
Graziano Pella.
Quite a few other quite a few other sort of Brazilian players.
Lavazzi as well.
Lavezzi,
Lavezzi went, he did. He left
yeah,
Napoli. Man, that front
quite
three.
quite a lot of South American players in general sort of went over there to collect some big bucks, and there's still a couple of Brazilians lurking
Still
there
lost
now.
over there.
I remember Carlos Tevez went over there for a while and did approximately zero work. As standard.
Classic Tevez. Yeah, loves a pound note, just Tevez.
Yeah,
loves a pound note.
Took a few £1 million from China, played a couple of games, and then went back to Argentina a little bit larger than life.
And perfect, Adam, your thoughts or your memories of Ramires as a player?
Well, I'm going to highlight Ramires. He seemed to always have a good game against Man United. So that's the reason I think Andy didn't want to mention it. But yeah, he always seemed to have a knack of pulling it against Man United. And I seem to remember there was a really good volley he seemed to score at Stamford Bridge against them. I did just double check just to make sure I haven't made this up, but he definitely did. So
I think it's in the back of my mind somewhere. I can remember it.
Somewhere itched in there. But yeah, it definitely. I mean, there was what Andy said. He was tenacious. He was up and down the pitch. Just had stamina. That's what I remember. Like, he just didn't seem to tire out very quickly, did he? He was like the Kante of young. So it's weird saying that as well, to be fair. But Ramires, hell of a player. What about your memories?
I think just him being that kind of natural, it's kind of easy to say, but that natural Makelele replacement, that it felt like, or the SEN maybe kind of vibe, where Chelsea just constantly had that influence in their midfield. They've found another one. They found another player who does this incredibly well and who's just very proficient at everything. I just remember him being an all-round very good player. And of course, that goal against Barcelona. But to all three, we wish them a very happy retirement. I'm sure they won't be struggling too much and they'll have plenty of beach houses to pick from. So enjoy them, guys. You've earned them. We, on the other hand, are going to go and discuss lots of scandals in our blimp. So if you're ready, listeners, we are ready to take off. And here we are, despite the fact that it seems like the news has only been one scandal and you are unable to escape the Liz Truss, Kwamikaze scandals that are going around. We have actually managed to find some more. So maybe we can take a bit of the heat off Liz, maybe. So let's start with one that we said we were going to discuss on Monday. We said we were going to discuss it. Monday. We wanted to do a bit more reading. We wanted to make sure we got this right because this one is a little bit dark, I think is probably the right word. But Adam, do you want to lead us into, we are going to France, I believe.
Yeah, so it's been a bad time for France, it has to be said. And I don't know if this tops it, but certainly this scandal has ruffled a few feathers in France, in particular around the French president. So Noel Le Graet, he's called. He's an 80-year-old, should I say. He's got 2 years left on his contract. But he has been accused by the magazine, and I have to just quote this because they're the ones that are making this allegation. They've made this investigation into this, and they've basically uncovered ex-staff as well as current staff who have accused Le Graet of sexual harassment, essentially. So this is stemmed from a number of text messages as well as actions, and it seems like the French Football Federation have covered it up over a number of years. So just to give context around the text messages, and this is in quotation marks, so the source is Le Monde to protect us as well. More to the point.
Yeah, definitely. I can't afford any lawyers, I'll tell you that.
Exactly. I don't think any of us can, but these are some of the quotes that are supposedly sent by Le Graet. So one says, "Come to my house for dinner tonight. I prefer blondes. So if you're interested, you're really good looking. I'd like you in my bed." Another source summarized Le Graet's behavior with women. It's quite simply, he'd jump on anything that moves. So that kind of sums up a little bit about the extent. It did cause the French sports minister to launch an investigation, and there was a personal conversation between the minister, Le Graet, and the CEO of French Football Federation. Now, they've counteracted by accusing the magazine of making lies, as well as these ex-employees. as you can understand. It hasn't gone down too well in France, especially with everything that's going on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
He is a Deschamps loyalist, and when Deschamps was asked about it, he said, yeah, there is a bit of a dark cloud, but I can't comment on the situation. So it does feel like at the moment there's a lot going on, but he's refusing to leave his post. He says, I'm fit and well. I'm able to carry on in my duties. I'm not doing anything wrong. There was a sub-story that seemed to suggest there's something else, but it hasn't been reported in too much extent, so I don't want to speculate on that. But when I spoke to you guys offline, it did seem quite deep, but whether those allegations will surface is another thing. So all I would say is I'm not going to comment on those because I don't want us to get in further shit. But to cap it all off in France, I did highlight to you guys, and we'll just share it with the listener. So France under 18s had a tournament. So I'll just get the name of this tournament because this tournament's been going on since 2007. And basically it's the top teams within sort of that kind of age bracket. So it's called the Lafarge Foot Avenir. And this year it was played between France, Poland, Estonia, and Scotland. So basically, group stage competition, they play against each other. So it went down to the last game of the tournament, whereby France had to beat Poland. Got a bit feisty, it has to be said. So Poland had taken a lead, it made it 2-1 in the game itself. So France lost their heads. 4 players sent off in total, and this was all in a space of 20 minutes. It has to be kind of put that to picture. But essentially, Bernard Diomede, who some may remember, he's the ex-Liverpool winger and also a World Cup winner in 1998. He's the coach. He couldn't calm down his players, and in the 77th minute, the referee had to cancel and abandon the match. So it made Poland win the match. They were winning at this point 3-2.
There we go.
So promise for Poland, right? But yeah, the red mist is there for France football. If it wasn't bad enough that the natural team isn't doing quite well, it seems the whole French Federation is in turmoil at the moment. So get your thoughts.
Just to add to the French Football Federation, obviously they're also under a bit of heat from their senior teams players at the moment over the image rights as well. So
that is a busy legal department at the moment.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, they're putting in the overtime at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if we went on LinkedIn and fucking hiring.
You speak French, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Here's a book of law, help. But yeah, Kylian Mbappe has apparently led a long-standing issue that they've been unhappy, being sponsored by major brands. So for example, with a lot of the beef is against the fact that their image is being used, with partnerships such as like KFC and some betting companies, Coca-Cola and that kind of thing.
But also rival brands, right? So if you're sponsored by Adidas, they might have a different kind of brand. So
exactly. Now I can understand that because apparently with a lot of French players, Mbappe included, a bit like in England as well, their money goes to charities and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, I would admire Mbappe's stance more if he wasn't so if
he wasn't who he was.
It's just more of a club that he plays for, what they stand for as an organisation. And let's be honest, the only reason why he's still in France and not playing for Real Madrid is because he took money above all else, and that's what was important to him. So I think that does lead to a wider conversation where I think footballers have much more of a voice, or willing to use their voice more. And there's a lot more, I guess, consciousness about who they're being partnered with and things like that. And I think
that can only be a good thing. I think that can only be a good thing because, especially if I go like very quickly, because it's just like to America, for example, in college football, the students there have finally got the rights for their image rights, right? And it's like this huge thing in American sports culture now. But these clubs were profiting billions and billions of dollars off the back of these people without their consent, and they got nothing, right? Now, obviously, in football, they get paid. But if you imagine a company making, or anybody making loads of money off your face with something you don't necessarily agree with, that's going to be like, that's just plain wrong, right? So it's good that the players are getting more of a voice. I feel like Kylian Mbappe maybe needs to quieten his voice sometimes, but this is like maybe a good thing that he's doing. But I think we need to talk about like the first scandal that we kind of brought up with the sexual harassment. I feel like football is going through a real moment at the moment. Like even with, if we go back to the club I support, Crew, or Mark Overmars getting sacked from Ajax, there's been quite a string of them for a while now, and I think it's good that these are coming to light. It's kind of like the football's Me Too movement or Me Too moment kind of thing. But this could involve, like, it wouldn't surprise me if every federation has these kind of problems, right? Because we see that every business, every industry has these problems. But I don't know, where am I going with this? I suppose my question would be to either of you, and I don't expect a concrete answer, but do you expect the federations to actually deal with this properly, or do you think it will just be swept under the rug as quickly as possible? Because I know what I think, but what do you guys think?
I think obviously Andy kind of summed it up nicely, is that some federations still don't know the morality of what their actions are. And I think it's going to be very difficult. And it feels like it needs people to actually push them into it, much like the Mbappe case, for example. They had a year to act on what the request was, and they still didn't do it. So, I feel like with this one, it's going to be interesting how much of that information turns out to be true, and therefore... could there be more pressure on them? And I think it's down to the fact that also with this case, it seems to be going for a number of years. So, I mean, the indiscretions here by the French Football Federation here seems to sum up that there's some deeper, darker culture going on. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is embedded across different associations. They think it's acceptable, and probably because it is a generation thing as well. I think they are used to that. So therefore, like we had with the case with the Spanish case that Andy flags on Monday, obviously, the culture is changing. You can't do those kind of things, or can't kind of say it like on the side and just expect it to be laughed off. So I wonder how deep it is, but I'm hoping to God it's not as bad as FIFA. So let's wait and see.
I think maybe a positive is that with the rise of the women's game and with the rise of women's influence within the sport in general, then maybe they will be held to account a little bit more, and there will be more voices. Like, I don't know, in the UK, like whenever I put football coverage on in the house, the missus always blows her mind that there's women talking about football on the TV. She's like, usually in Italy, it's just the attractive host and she doesn't say anything, right?
Yeah.
But I think the fact that there's these voices on our screens more now, that they won't be afraid. They'll have even more impetus and won't be afraid to actually keep bringing these things up and won't let it be forgotten. Whereas some male pundits who we know may not be so willing to bring it up. So I think maybe they will be held to account. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I think I think football, as you say, is going through a bit of a reckoning, because obviously you've had historical abuse cases into Chelsea recently, over in Celtic as well. And I think, certainly if you go back to the French example, their rugby chief for their 2023 World Cup was also suspended over similar accusations as the French Football Federation is going through. So it is clearly a culture that has manifested itself over years and years. And I think with the use of social media, and I guess an increased awareness that, if you want to include women and the wider society as a whole into the sport of football, then you kind of have to adjust your standards and better your standards. I think it's the better word for that one. And I think naturally when it comes to that side of things, it's going to be people who adapt, and there's going to be people who fall by the wayside. I think that's what's going to happen with French football. People like that are going to be chucked to the wayside at some point and make place for somebody who's a bit more, forward thinking and modern thinking, and just not a dick.
I think that's it. Either catch up.
That's the thing. It's not hard, is it? It's just like just don't be a dick, don't be a sex pest, and you're already going to be doing better than quite a few people in football in the past. So
no, exactly. It is not difficult, and as people always say, if you're a guy, you've got to pick up other guys when you see them doing it. If you know what I mean, you've got to turn around and be like, man, what are you doing? You can't, like, you know what I mean? You have to pick up the guys when you see it happening as well. But from people maybe not acting in the interests of women in football, we're going to go for people acting in the interests of women for football, and we're going to go to the Iranian national team. Now, I'm not going to go into the situation in Iran because we don't have time and I don't have the knowledge. But very basically, if you live under a rock, Mahsa Amini was unfortunately, incredibly sadly, it looks like killed by police for the crime of not covering her hair in the streets of Tehran. Ever since, the country has been protests, Iranian women cutting off their hair. It feels like a real kind of spring for Iran. And I think people forget that in the 70s and 80s, Iran was like a super liberal country. Like, it had like the highest percentage of women educated, highest percentage of women going to university. It was this crazy liberal country, and it's just gone completely the other way. But now there's these huge protests, and the Iranian national team have kind of stepped up in the way that they could. And in their final World Cup game, they were playing Senegal in a friendly. All of the players covered the Iran badge on their shirt, as they felt that they were not proud to represent the country and what they stood for. And I feel like it was a beautiful moment, because I think everyone was looking to the Iranian national team with what was happening. And with all the controversy that's going on around the Qatar World Cup in general, etc., I think everyone was going, right, are they going to do something? And I was just really happy that they did. I think it's a really powerful statement. And I think the government there, or whatever their form of government is, once they see that things like that, the wider world are not only more aware of it, but people within their country are willing to act on it. I think it was just a really big moment. Like, what did you guys think when you saw it? I love this story.
Yeah,
I think it's
definitely
a
beautiful.
good moment, yeah.
I was just going to add, there's a listener of ours called David Shams. He's based in America, and he does share, because he's partly Iranian, he shares a few of the kind of stories that came out. And Iranian football is a bit of a political hotbed. It's one of those that's kind of used as the tool to allow, I suppose, to an extent, these footballers and just generally the whole communities to get beyond and focus on something different for once. But right now, obviously, there's some dark times that are going through right now. And it doesn't look too nice. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't feel like I'm educated as much on the subject. But certainly what you can see, and in terms of the pictures, they tell 1,000 words, don't they? Just the fact that you see that one face where they're shaving the hair off, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Well, this is it, exactly. I just think it was a really nice moment and football doing its bit. It's a week where football is kind of trying to do its bit. Andy, should we go to is it a scandal? Your headline that we want to bring up?
I would call it a scandal. Well, I think Qatar reacted to it like a scandal.
That's very true.
So, they famously take criticism really, really well. And this is a classic case of Qatar taking criticism in the way that you might expect. Denmark, for the past sort of couple of years have, generally speaking, made the opposition known to the World Cup. I think we don't really need to go over the circumstances of how Qatar was awarded the World Cup. We kind of all know about this by this point. So to get to the point, Denmark have released a new set of jerseys for the World Cup in 2022. Hummel, who's the manufacturer of their kits, released an Instagram statement essentially saying that we wanted to send a dual message. So this year will be the 30th anniversary of their Euro 1992, which is one of the greatest moments. It probably is the greatest moment in Denmark's footballing history. And they also wanted to make a point about Qatar and its human rights records. What they've done, if you look at the kits, they look really, really fresh, and I might buy it, but enough of the aesthetic side of things, because that's not the point. But they've toned down all the details. So like the logo and, the Denmark logo and the Hummel logo is sort of barely visible. So certainly when you're watching it on the telly, which millions of people are, you're not really going to see much of it, apart from like really, really up close. So yeah, and part of that is due to the fact that they don't wish to be visible during a tournament that has cost thousands of people's their lives. That's the words coming from Hummel in their Instagram statement. They believe that the sport should bring people together, and when it doesn't, we want to make a statement. So Qatar have reacted to this really, really well. So they've said that since winning the right to host the FIFA World Cup, the sporting committee have worked diligently alongside the Qatari government to ensure the tournament delivers a long-lasting legacy and all sorts of PR bollocks. They've denied that thousands of lives have been lost through a collaboration with UEFA, etc., etc. This resulted in a better understanding of the progress made, the challenges faced, and the legacy will be delivered beyond 2022. So it's just a lot of like corporate nonsense, essentially. For that reason,
I did like that it was called the Supreme Committee. It sounds like like something from North Korea. It sounds like you've been beckoned by the Supreme Committee. Oh God, this is not going to end well.
Yeah, exactly. You just need that Star Wars music over the top. But yeah, the key part of the statement they've put out is that for that reason, we dispute Hummel's claim that this tournament has cost thousands of people their lives. Furthermore, we wholeheartedly reject trivialising our genuine commitment to protect the health and safety of the 30,000 workers who built the FIFA World Cup. Whether that's 30,000 left still standing, I don't know. That same commitment now extends to 150,000 workers across various tournament services and 40,000 workers in the hospitality sector. So to add to that, Qatar is only a very, very small country, so they've had to import a lot of foreign labour. A lot of it from reasonably impoverished parts of Nepal. They've had a huge, and India, and Nepal especially, have been treated horrendously. I mean, The Guardian have done some brilliant exposés long before this World Cup has started over their passports being stolen and things like that. In an admission of this, FIFA have set up a like a trying to set up a reparations committee, and even the Qatari government are setting up their own reparations thing, where they've not admitted they've done anything wrong, but it's one of those, if you felt we've done something wrong, please make a claim here.
Now a figure that I saw. Now, obviously, I've been like a few journalists that I follow on Twitter have kind of been trying to put names to these numbers and trying to obviously, as you can imagine, the information is impossible to find. But the figures for the reparations are, I think the figure I saw was £1,500.
Per person, or what they've
a family was given in because what they've done is they've admitted. So they've said that 3 people have died in the preparations for this World Cup, right? But they're only counting the people who died on site, right? So on the building site of the stadium. If it was moving things to and from the stadium, if it was within the accommodation, if it was blah, 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 they don't count it. One of these people, interestingly, was an English guy whose name escapes me now, which is really bad. I will find his name. He died because the health and safety equipment, he just fell off the side of the stadium, right? He counted. But none of these other numbers they're taking responsibility for. But one of the families they did, who was from Southeast Asia, I think they paid the family £1,500 as reparations of bad kind of thing. So even the committee is so predictable. The committee they're setting up is completely like everything FIFA do, like everything governments do. It's just for appearances, right?
Exactly. And I think with going with the Danish national team and their protest and manufacturer, I think they've done it in a way because obviously FIFA ban political statements from being made. So they've done that whole design change to still fit in with FIFA regulations. I think there is an argument to say that they've basically done they've made actions which don't have consequences for themselves, thus not being able to make more of a statement. I mean, I was speaking to a girlfriend about this earlier. I said, well, ultimately a big statement would be a country just not going. Literally just not getting on the plane, throwing the whole tournament into disarray. That would be, I think, the biggest statement you could make, to be perfectly honest. But I think that's not going to happen.
It's
let's be honest.
and I think it's almost unreasonable to expect it as well, because the players, it's not their fault the World Cup is where it is. It's not their fault what's happened. If they're gonna want to play the World Cup, it would be a beautiful thing to happen. I would love if the English team turned around and said, you know what, we're not doing it. I would be so proud. But it's not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen.
No, but I think it's good that a country is making themselves aware of it.
Yeah.
I think the English FA have talked about it, but not done anything, which is quite familiar.
Oh no, they did do those really pointless captain's armbands with like the rainbow
respect
C.
one set by Netherlands. Yeah,
just like cool, that'll make a difference. So but I think in terms of what we've seen so far, I think the Danish stance, is one that's certainly in the right direction. And I think hopefully what would be the biggest impact of this tournament is that we have a more transparent process where a World Cup being awarded to a country like Qatar on completely non-footballing reasons doesn't happen again. And I think that's hopefully a realistic impact we can hope for in the future.
We can hope. That being said, Saudi Arabia are bidding for the one after America and Mexico and Canada. So we shall see. But maybe I hope there is a difference, and I hope Hummel aren't the only kit manufacturer that do something. I hope players speak out. I hope managers speak out. I hope something happens, because, I don't know what you for years I've always thought in my head, I'm not going to watch this World Cup. I'm not going to watch this World Cup. Meanwhile, knowing that I was definitely going to watch the World Cup, right? And I'm going to feel guilty the entire time watching it. I feel like football does need to do something. With our World Cup podcast, we're trying to plan how we're going to do our little protest or how we're going to kind of voice our opinions. But I think everybody in football needs to try and do something just to at least make people as aware. I think also by talking about it, you could highlight what's going on over there. And I think, one bit that does give me a bit of satisfaction already is knowing full well that number one, it's going to be quite a shit World Cup compared to others, because the World Cup is about atmosphere. Now, I know you get some criticism saying, oh, people just want it in Europe all the time, but think about the Brazil World Cup back in 2014. You had the South Africa one was great. Even if you don't like the Brazilers, the atmosphere was great.
Yeah, it was something unique about it. Again, even with Japan and
South Korea,
they had a unique vibe where, if you look at, the tournament itself is going to be devoid of atmosphere because it's going to be so out the way for everybody, so unaffordable and so empty in terms of atmosphere. And also think about the impact of it afterwards, because when you have Olympic Games and big sporting events, you have a lot of elephant stadiums, they call them. Literally everything that's been built in Qatar on huge expense at the expense of people's lives. It's good, there's not going to be any use for it. So it's going to be no lasting legacy of that tournament whatsoever. It's just going to be remembered 30, 40 years time as a thing that happened, but I don't think it's going to go down as particularly memorable. And
because it feels more manufactured than anything else. Really, I don't know what you think, Adam, but I think it feels more just so manufactured. The whole thing is going to feel like it's in a plastic container, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I was going to say, to add to this kind of debate, I think FIFA tested the water with Russia, because Russia, if you remember, had just invaded Ukraine, or that Donbass region, so to speak. So by the fact that it's kind of swept under the carpet and it was accepted as a success, I feel like they felt like, right, we can make this work, so to speak. And what I think disappoints me is when we've got the likes of David Beckham being there, kind of promoting this tournament. And obviously Gary Neville did a piece with him. And if you haven't got yourselves round to it, then Guardian Football Weekly have done a special with Gary Neville where they asked him why he didn't ask the question about the political aspect of Qatar, but he said he felt like he would be a bit of a hypocrite because he goes to Qatar quite regularly on a basis, and he didn't feel it was appropriate to ask that question. Now, you might say he's skimming around that question, a bit like Liz Truss does these days, but it has to be said, this tournament, I'm going to struggle to enjoy it. I think it will only be the football that gets me through it rather than the political and the other elements, but I hope it flops. Personally, I hope it flops.
I hope it completely falls on its arse.
We lose out on that.
I think one person who should be credited to speaking out for it, and whereas obviously David Beckham, unfortunately, as much as I love the bloke growing up as a kid, he's basically decided to take the money without the morals, which I thought it's a bit disappointing. But Eric Cantona,
what an interview, by the way, in the Athletic.
Yeah.
What an interview! Oh
yeah,
my God.
the Athletic does some cracking interviews recently, to be fair. But yeah, he's you can always rely on Eric Cantona to say it how it is.
I absolutely love him. I love him. I love him. I wish he played for Arsenal. My God.
The fact he's called out, his own former teammates and gone, you know what, that's not a good idea. And he's played it in quite a polite way, to be fair to him. But he's come out and said it, and he's been out against the Qatar movement for a long time. So yeah, I think there was some idiot on Twitter trying to promote some false equivalence by saying, "Oh, but you promote alcohol brands." I thought people's lives and a bottle of Heineken are not the same thing. Come on.
Wow, there was someone on our Twitter, actually. I don't know if you saw the notifications come up, who was trying to defend the Qatari
I have not
regime
seen
that.
thing. Was that under our Twitter?
It was on our Twitter, and he was masquerading as an Everton fan. So I'm going to say Everton fans. He probably wasn't an Everton fan. But he was, it was a very, very strange conversation of like, but if that happened, they're actually improving workers' rights. All the kind of bullshit that Gary Neville said in the promo for the documentary that he now has for Qatar World Cup, where he's trying to portray that he's taken them to task. But you're definitely not, Gary. Like, it always reminds me of the Beckenbauer quote from years ago when the World Cup was first being built, first starting. And someone asked him about slave labor in Qatar, and he said, "Well, I've not seen any slaves." I was like, like, really, Franz? And I feel like with that, it's not that like brutal a quote, but I feel like Gary Neville being like, "Well, I've seen the working conditions improve." Well, yeah, they're gonna show you the good side, mate. They're not gonna take you to the crap accommodation. Like in that promo, he's got them like, "Oh, it's not bad in here." It's like, yeah, they're not gonna show you the bloody like cupboard they've got them sleeping in, are they? Like, I think. I'm just really disappointed because I like Gary Neville, and I think politically I agree with him a lot, it seems. And I'm just really, I expected better from him, unfortunately. I expected better from him. But hopefully some people will speak out. I think it's a shame Norway didn't qualify because I think Norway were willing to do something. I think Haaland and a few of their players were willing to be like, we will do something.
And I think
they were the first ones to wear the T-shirts and stuff as well.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
And I think it's good of Scotland and Ireland to boycott the World Cup again.
Them morally, I don't know what their issue with Brazil was, but nice. Well, we're going to go to one a bit closer to home, and one that made me feel really, really uncomfortable when I read the headline. And I don't know if I was surprised or not, but this is the fact that it has been revealed that EFL clubs have been profiting from losses that their fans have made on Sky Bet. Now, before I go into detail on this very quickly in one word, is anybody surprised?
Nope.
No, me neither. So it seems like these clubs had an affiliate deal. Now, I don't know much about gambling. I'm terrible at it, but they had an affiliate deal, which meant that when fans sign up to Sky Bet, there's a box and you tick which team you support, right? It seems fairly innocuous. You just go, oh, yeah, it's a football thing. Of course they want to know. Well, then every time you lose, a part of your losses goes to your club. Now, for the League Two clubs, I think Accrington Stanley have been the one that's kind of been named so far, but every club has done this. They made something like £5,000 from a year. Which actually, Accrington Stanley for a League Two club actually is probably a nice little boost, right? Pays for something for a year. And I just find this story really, really, really horrible. It makes the whole thing of like, when the fun stop and all that shite completely like the idea of addiction is that, you can't stop once it's not fun because you're addicted. That's the nature of addiction, right? When I used to smoke, I never thought, oh, this is fun. If you know what I mean, I just couldn't stop doing it. So I feel like it just puts pay to all those like schemes and those like things they've tried to look like they're doing to reduce gambling or gambling addiction in the UK. They're now investigating whether Premier League clubs have the same deal. Spoiler alert, they definitely do. I would be so surprised if Premier League clubs don't. So far, Manchester United, Tottenham, Crystal Palace, and I think Everton have come out publicly and said they don't have these deals. The other 16 clubs in the Premier League have not issued a comment. So maybe they don't. Who knows? I would be very surprised if the Premier League club didn't have this deal, at least with one of their millions of gambling partners they have across the world. But from this story, my question is really, is it time for gambling companies to be treated like alcohol, like smoking? Is it time for them to just be removed from sports and removed from at least the advertising, removed from shirts, removed from the sponsorship completely? I'm going to start with you, Adam. How did this story make you feel, and what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sickener, but it's no surprise. I think there was a report around how many clubs don't have a gambling or a betting company associated with them. And I think, if I remember rightly, it wasn't many. I'm proud that Wycombe Wanderers is one of those that's never had a gambling company associated to it.
I'm going to say Crew as well. I don't think we have, but we don't have much to be proud of, to be fair. But I think that's one of them. Yeah,
exactly. So when you look at even championship level, there's a lot of clubs that are sponsored by one. And I just want to highlight one example, which is Stoke City. The Coates family obviously are run by 365. That's their company. That's who sponsor the ground. They sponsor the team. And yeah, they know about gambling. They know about the depths of how they get people into it, how they suck them into it. It's been well documented. I've been fortunate to know a footballer by the name of Scott Davies, who talks about his experience with gambling when he was young. He was just an academy youth player at Reading, and he gambled all of his earnings to the point that he'd spent all of his month's earnings in one hit, and then had to get his parents to help him out through the month because he couldn't afford to get to the ground, for example. Just basic stuff like getting petrol in the car because he'd spent it in one go. And you only have to look at the story of like Paul Merson to see how addiction really does take over your life. Even though we thought he was over it, it came to like a few weeks ago that he'd been gambling during lockdown on, what was it? Something really stupid. I think it was like badminton matches or something like that, where he had no knowledge of the sport. And I think it was the whole earnings the house or his family had was spent during lockdown. And it's just, I do feel like we have to like put it to a side now and like actually have a blanket ban on it, just in the sport and outside of it as well. So we're talking about outside the grounds as well, because I think there is a rule now, luckily, that you can't have betting outlets within the grounds themselves. So that's at least a promising start. But the problem is, like, you've kind of associated, like, you've got Sky that kind of make it normalized. They feel like it's a thrill for players and people. And the fact is, you're getting younger generations now betting. I think the extent of the bets are like scary, because we've heard of Matt Letizia even being involved in these scandals where he won some money by making sure that the opposition team got a throw in. First, he talks about this story, how he got involved. And, you know, I think we've just got to make sure it's not involved anymore. It's just when you hear the stories of those that suffer and how badly they suffer, and it's like anything, if you're addicted to it, you'll crave it. You just want to go and do it again and again, no matter what. So, yeah, get out of football for the better of our fans, people, just to make sure their health is there. I think when you hear these horror stories and what they've gone through, what the families have gone through, it really isn't worth it. It really isn't worth it. So, yeah, it's horrible ending to this kind of section. But, yeah, it's one that has to be discussed, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and I think with the lower league clubs, the figures, like, it doesn't matter. The figure doesn't matter. It's the principle, right? But I feel like it's really going to get discussed when it's revealed that Premier League clubs have it, because that's when the amount of money that they could, if they have these deals, could be making from the amount of worldwide bets that happen on the Premier League. Like, it is an insane amount of money. But Andy, do you expect Rick Parry to actually do something? Do you expect this to go anywhere? Because I think this story is going to blow up.
Well, I remember looking at it, and apparently these deals sort of stopped centrally back in like 2020. But I think it's come about because certain clubs like Accrington have had like what they call legacy deals,
Right.
which are continuing up until about 2023, 2024. And I think indirectly there has been something done about it there, but yeah, I think there's a lot more that can be done. I think there's a lot of clubs that are relying on gambling sponsors at the moment, and I've always found it odd that Sky have such a foothold in football that they could sponsor the league, but you could also bet on that league, and you're the main broadcaster of that league. Unlike
it feels weird.
Yeah, it feels weird, and it feels like one organization has too much of an influence on what goes on. And I think gambling as a whole, it's through years and years of advertising, because even now, like every time you watch, you see like a Ladbrokes ad or a Paddy Parrot ad, it's all about the thrill of gambling, and it's something you do just when you're out with the lads and kind of thing. You go out to the pub, do a line of coke, and bet some money. They make things what is essentially abuses, things you can be addicted to, very, very normalized. And it's especially on the online gambling, because when we were 18, I don't think online gambling was as big of a thing as it was now.
You'd have to go onto your computer. It wasn't in your pocket.
Yeah, it wasn't like when I was like 18, it wasn't like a flick of an app where you could just go into it and stuff like that. And back then people used to be able to put credit cards on there, so you're spending money that you don't have on a game where you can lose even more money. So you've almost like a double loss. And it's just gambling is just obviously it needs to be cut out of sport. There's always going to be gambling. There's always going to be there's nothing wrong with putting a bet on sport, and there's nothing wrong with betting on sport in general, but when it's shoved in your faces left, right, and centre, and let's bear in mind that it's a family game ultimately. People take their kids to games. People's kids. You've got 9, 10 teenagers who are impressionable watching these adverts, and they just see it as just being
part of the game. It's part of the game. It's what you do when you go, like on a Saturday, you put an accumulator on, and I'm bad for that. I'll put an accumulator on every week, if you know what I mean. And but you're right, it's shown as, if you're into football, you do this. It's part of being into football. So I think, it needs to be treated the same way as the smoking was in the F1. I remember that in the 90s, right? Was that banned? I remember that being a big thing. No more smoking adverts on TV. It was overnight, right? Alcohol, you can't have alcohol on your shirts anymore, right? I think that's or is that just in Europe? I can't remember. Maybe that's just in Europe. But there needs to be something similar with gambling. And I think the best thing to do, or the good thing to do, would be for the clubs that have taken, when it's revealed how much money they've taken, they donate that money to a gambling charity or a charity that helps people get over gambling addiction, because it's the least you can do at this point is give back the money you've taken from it, because it makes me feel really, really ill. It's just a horrible, horrible story. But we're now actually going to talk about literal football. We're going to talk about the game that we love. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We will see you after this. And here we are. It's time for League Football is back. The Nations League's done. And we have got a mental month of October coming up. I think Arsenal have about 52 games in 43 days. I think they're going to be waiting. They're going to be waiting on the side of the pitch and getting changed for the next game. I think it is going to be hectic. I have just seen today Antonio Conte complaining about fixture congestion. You've definitely changed your tune from last season, mate. I really wish he'd shut his mouth sometimes. But we're going to start with Antonio Conte's home country. I'm going to start with Serie A. This weekend, there's only one game that we can really start talking about. It's definitely the biggest game of the weekend, and it is Inter hosting Roma. Mourinho returning to San Siro is always a beautiful thing to see. He is always welcomed with open arms by the Inter Curva when he walks in. I think his record there hasn't been too great, so that definitely makes his welcome a little bit warmer. But what do we think for this game? Inter look in crisis. They do not look inspiring at all. Roma, maybe in the same boat, maybe looking a little bit better. I think this could be
It could be
both
tight.
managers really need a win. Both managers really need a
Yes.
win, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it probably doesn't help Inter's cause when Brozovic went off injured. Lukaku's not going to be able to return for this match. So it seems like he's got a full month now without playing any football since he got his injury a few weeks back.
He's too busy shooting cringy adverts for Calvin Klein. Have you seen that advert? Oh my God.
No,
It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's so bad. It
is terrible for Inter. Inter are craving for that one win. I do fear for Inzaghi. I feel if he doesn't get a result soon, the pressure will be on him right now. Roma on the flip side, I expect Zaniolo, who's just come back into the team, may cause some trouble here, coming back to a previous stomping ground, obviously. So yeah, I feel like Roma have more potential this time compared to last season, but it wouldn't surprise me if somehow this ends up as a draw. I think the thing that Inter fans are craving here, Rory, is Aslani. Aslani is earmarked as the replacement for Brozovic, or at least stepping in when Brozovic has an injury. Let's see if Inzaghi is bold enough to actually play him, because I think that is going to be the catalyst of potentially where this squad goes this season. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, look, we've all been waiting to see him. We know that he was a really exciting player for Empoli. He was someone that at the beginning of the season, we were like, this guy's going to be the cover for Brozovic. He's going to give them options. Brozovic can actually take a rest. And we've seen nothing from him. So I think depending on how this performance goes, it will show Inter fans whether they do have another option, whether this is a viable thing. It might just give them hope. I think I'm excited to see him play. I'm definitely excited to see him play. As I said, at Empoli, he was very, very exciting. Empoli always create great players. If you look at the players that have come through that club, it is insanity. But the real sign of hope for Inter will be that Roma haven't beaten them since February 2017. That's home or away. Nainggolan got 2 and Perotti. Icardi scored for Inter. So it was a very, very long time since Roma have beaten Inter. That will give them hope. Last year, Inter won 3-1 and 2-0. But as you said, neither team really in great form. It will be a good game. I think it will be a good game. As I said, both teams desperate for a win. And Inzaghi, there's a Inter legend hanging in the background, and the Inter fans are just waiting for him to get the job. He just left his hometown club. Stankovic is waiting in the wings, and the Inter fans kind of want him. And I think Inzaghi, if he doesn't fix up, he could be gone pretty soon. So a huge, huge game at the San Siro this weekend. There was one game you wanted to highlight for us, Adam. Where are you taking us to?
So I'm going to take you to Sunday's match, and that is Sassuolo versus Salernitana. Now, for everyone, they'll think, what the hell and why am I bringing you to this match? This is quite monumental for Serie A, more so because there's going to be the first time that a female is officiating this match. So Maria Sole Ferreira Capuzzi, I think is how you pronounce it. So may have butchered that, but she has refereed at Serie B as well as Serie C. So potential there. So she's worked herself through the ranks since 2015, it says here, according to her background. So obviously following the trend that we've seen in Europe, especially in the UK as well, where we saw Sean Macy as well take up a position as a referee for a match. Let's see if this continues, certainly in Italy. I'm sure referees in Italy are scrutinized enough, but if she turns out to be really good, I'm sure supporters will endorse more female referees, but we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, it's quite a low-key match, it has to be said. Sassuolo and Salernitana are probably not going to cause too much issues. But that was the main one I wanted to really highlight. That's a key monumental moment for Serie A, definitely this weekend. Just quick one as well. I just want to call out Napoli versus Torino on Saturday as well. Raspadori on form. Obviously, can they continue that? And obviously, the only other one that I want to highlight because of how poor they've been, Juventus. Allegri's been off the press because of Liz Truss and co. But they take on Bologna on Sunday night, 7:45. Let's see if Skorupski can keep a clean sheet against this terrible Juventus side. What's your thoughts, Rory?
Arnautovic is definitely gonna score. I need to see the Arnautovic shithousery at the Allianz as he's giving it with his ears to the
Yeah, can't
half-empty
wait.
stadium. I need to see it. Elsewhere, we do have Atalanta taking on Fiorentina.
Yes.
Fiorentina really not had a great start to the season, but they did win their last game, so maybe things are turning around for Vincenzo Italiano. Atalanta, of course, sharing the top spot with Napoli on 17 points, winning 4 of their last 5. I think we're getting Atalanta back. I think we're seeing Atalanta back. It's beautiful to see. Milan will be going away to Empoli. We have Lazio taking on Spezia. Lecce versus Cremonese in a huge game at the bottom on Sunday. That is going to be massive. Lecce currently on... where are they? Oh, they're 15th with 6 points. They got their first win of the season, of course, before. And Cremonese 19th with 2 points, still looking for their first win. That is going to be a huge game. And the only other game I'm going to bring up is the surprise package of the season so far, Udinese, who I'm going to remind you, listeners, they are currently 3rd on 16 points, having won all of their last 5 games. They are going to be away to Verona, one of our favorite teams from last season, but who are not doing that well this season. I would expect Udinese to continue their incredible run and get 3 points in Verona. A kind of northeast derby there as well, I think. They're both very, very close.
Yeah.
I feel like they're two teams that don't like each other. That's in the back of my head somewhere. I feel like that could be a thing. Yeah.
It could be a thing.
It could be a thing. There you go, listeners. It could be a thing. That's as certain as we're getting. But that's the Serie A for this weekend because we have to talk Premier League. And there's a reason why I've got Arsenal shirt behind me, retro Arsenal shirt on from when we used to batter Tottenham a lot. It's the North London Derby this weekend. The weekend all kicks off with it at 12:30 UK time. So there's not much drinking time, guys. Not much time to drink. You'll have to start drinking at 9 o'clock, I think. But I am absolutely crapping myself, despite the fact that we are, and I'm going to say it because it might not be true as of after this weekend, we are top of the league. I need to double check that. We are top of the league. Yeah. Just love to look at it. Despite the fact that we're top of the league, I still don't feel confident, but there is good news for Arsenal fans, bad news for Tottenham fans. Kulusevski is doubtful, as is Hugo Lloris. This is huge. I've said for a while that Hugo Lloris might need to be replaced, but I'd be pretty happy if he wasn't in the team as well. Kulusevski, I'm delighted about. For Arsenal, it looks like Smith Rowe is out until next year. He's had to have surgery on his groin. He's only played 47 minutes this season. I miss Smith Rowe, him and Saka together. We need the song belting out around the Emirates again, but we're going to have to wait until after December. I know how I'm feeling about it. I'm going to give my opinion soon. Andy, I'm going to go to you first. North London Derby, best derby in the country, right? Easily.
No. Absolutely not. No, I think Liverpool United tops that one. But no, to be fair, like Arsenal, Spurs always very entertaining games. There's always lots of controversy and drama and just pure Barclays. Which you'll absolutely love to see. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good game for either way. I'm interested to see Arsenal's reaction to it because again, I've always been of the assertion, we spoke about it before, that Arsenal have basically beaten teams they're supposed to be beaten. And then the moment they came up against, a rival, they lost. And I think this is an important game for Arsenal. I think if they come out the end of this weekend having beaten Spurs convincingly, that really puts some respectability over a potential, what would be most certainly a top 4 challenge, but maybe aspire to something more. And I think this is the kind of game that Arsenal need to win to show that they really are a substantial force this season. But I think on the other hand, Spurs are more than capable of beating them, especially on the counter-attack, because they were vulnerable against Manchester United for that one. Obviously, I think, bad timing for an Arsenal fan.
Fucking brutal timing, I'll be honest.
The hat-trick he scored against Leicester, they were exceptional finishes as well. For somebody who's not scored and been dropped to the bench because of his, indifferent start to the season, again, Kane, even by his standards, has actually quite a good start to the season because he doesn't really get going to November normally. So I think it'll be the game's going to be probably run a lot in terms of like the transitions and
Mhm.
how both Arsenal and Tottenham make use out of the rare moments of space that they'll get, because I think it will be quite tight in midfield. So
Mhm.
it'll be, I think tactically, it will be a very interesting game to watch, certainly from a relatively neutral point of view.
Yeah. No, I'm excited.
Mm.
What do you think, Adam? I think Thomas Partey's fit, which is going to be huge. But what do you think about this game? How do you see it going?
I think it'll be dependent on who gets the best start to the game.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean, who's going to be the most positive in terms of attacking. What you have to say about Spurs is they haven't necessarily got into games really well. So if I just allude everyone back to the Chelsea match, they were on good form for that match going into it, but they had a terrible start, but they pulled themselves back into it. A certain Richarlison
Literally
will be
pulled.
fired up as well
Yeah.
after a certain
Yeah.
event that happened during the week. I think he'll be a key player. That said, he doesn't always have a great game against Arsenal. I think, and I'm just speculating here, I think based on the form, Arsenal should win this a bit similar to last year.
Terrifies
But
me.
that said, obviously, Spurs, you can never know what Conte is going to think up of. And I think he's going to play very defensively and go on the counter. It'll be just a case of, will the defenders, and we're talking about Gabriel potentially and whoever he's next to, can they handle the likes of Son, Kane, as well as Richarlison? I think that's going to be key. I think the fact that Kulusevski isn't in the squad potentially for Saturday, they've still got quality. I mean, if you think about Lucas Moura as well, he's a player that likes to turn up for the London derbies as well. So, I would say it's not a foregone conclusion.
I'm terrified of Richarlison. I know he's going to turn up in a derby. He's the type of person who's not only going to be an absolute wanker the entire 90 minutes, but he's definitely going to turn up in a derby. So I'm absolutely petrified of him. But like you said, we did him at home last time. We're in good form. We shall see how it goes. God, I'm so glad I can get it out of the way. First game on a Saturday. It can either ruin my weekend or make my weekend, and it's just done, right? God, I hate it. I hate it. I'm already feel nervous. But we've got one more derby this weekend on Super Sunday. It's all kicking off a bit further north as we have the Manchester Derby. I'm going to throw to you, Andy. How do you feel ahead of this one?
Oh, I actually think we've got a good chance of sort of certainly getting a result. I think certainly last season, I think the derby performances against Manchester City were some of the worst that I've seen, certainly in my lifetime. I think even if we haven't necessarily got the same quality from back to front that Manchester City do, I think we've at least got a bit of bite back. Certainly in terms of like obviously the midfield, there's a bit more craft in there. There's a bit more energy, which I think was lacking certainly in the last year or so. And I think even the past few years where we've been absolutely shite, we've still often been able to get good results against Manchester City. And I think and I think the key battle is essentially going to be between Haaland and Martinez. That's going to be the main key. I think obviously Dortmund played Ajax last year, and Martinez dealt with that situation really, really well. And I think there's obviously that whole discussion over his height, Martinez's height, which I just find tiresome. But to be fair, Haaland, I think he'll be the difference maker because.
That's what he is. He's a difference maker.
Yeah, he's not going to. Again, I'm not going to get into this whole how many times he touches the ball because we've long established it doesn't matter. If he gets a yard of space, you could pretty much guarantee that he's going to put it in the net. And I do worry as well because David De Gea is very rigid, sticks on his line a lot. So I think Varane and Martinez are going to have to work together as a partnership. I think without wanting to jump on the whole bandwagon, I think with Harry Maguire looking like he'll miss the game, and I think perhaps given the form that he's in at the moment is probably not a
the
bad
last
thing.
thing he needs. The last thing he needs is to go up against Erling Haaland at the minute. That's
precisely.
the last.
I think
the last
that's
thing
absolutely
he
the last thing. I mean, either
Yeah.
way, I think he's been dropped anyway. So I think even if he had been fit, he would have been playing. But I think United have got finally what seems to be a settled defensive partnership, which works well together, and that's something we've lacked for ages. But it will be an incredible test because De Bruyne in centre midfield is going to be much, much better than anything that they faced.
Yeah.
And I think up front, obviously, with Rashford potentially not being fit enough, certainly not to start. Martial, he had a good pre-season, but he got injured very, very
I
early
forgot
on.
he was still there. Yeah.
He had a good pre-season, to be fair. There was a lot of hope. And then after the first game, he's got injured and he's not been seen since. It seems to be one of those injuries where it was initially 2 or 3 weeks he was out and it's kind of dragged on quite to what is essentially a couple of months at this point. So
what would scare me, Andy, is the fact that this is the game that Haaland has openly said, this is the game I'm looking forward to playing the most. That would scare me. But I'm going to say
there is that history there of his dad, isn't there?
I think we could see a pretty huge celebration. I'm going to say when he scores. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say when he scores. Adam, we do need to talk about City as well. What are you making of City heading into this game? Can United stop them?
I think it's going to be a struggle. That said, Man United do like to pull it on for these kind of games. So I'm not going to completely dismiss Man United. And I just think maybe the break has done Man City some good as well, to be fair, because I appreciate they probably wanted to keep that momentum going with game to game, but sometimes you also need that little bit of a break. So I feel like this is a nice little refresh for both sides, in fairness. But yeah, I think it's going to be, if they play like we know they can play, it could be curtains for United, because like Andy says, you just give them a bit of space and that could be the decisive moment that turns this match. Bernardo Silva, has to be said, has been in superb form, but also Gundogan, who played against England, he looks really good again. Gundogan. So I think between them, they've got some quality players, and it's scary to think they've still got depth on the bench as well. So the fact that they can bring on De Bruyne off the bench to like almost give you another half an hour's performance is just scary, isn't it, really? So yeah, I don't think there's many injury worries for City going into this weekend. So
there's only John Stones. John Stones is the only player who's going to miss out, but Nathan Ake has now played 2 full games for Holland and seems pretty match fit. So I think he's ready to just walk in and do what he does. But elsewhere in the Premier League, we do have, I'm going to mention kind of 2 more games. De Zerbi's first game in the Premier League. Woo! And it couldn't be much harder. He has Liverpool at Anfield. This is going to be a bit of a baptism of fire for poor Roberto. But we've seen Brighton get a 3-3 draw there last year, I think. Did they get a draw in the end? I feel like we've seen some big performances from Brighton at Anfield in the past. Maybe this could be another one. Pretty excited for that one. And on Monday, we have, now this is a proper spicy game. It's good to see it back in the Premier League. The Midlands derby? Yeah, East Midlands derby, right?
Yeah.
Leicester will host Nottingham Forest. Leicester in all sorts of shit. Nottingham Forest looking all right. Last year, these 2 teams played each other in the FA Cup, and that Muppet was banned for trying to punch a player on the pitch, right?
Yeah.
These are 2 teams that do not like each other. What do we expect from Leicester Forest? I'm excited.
I'm excited because I think there'll be lots of goals. I don't think there's going to be any kind of side is going to win this necessarily. I think there'll be plenty of goals, plenty of action, I think it's fair to say. But yeah, it could go either way, to be fair. I mean, Steve Cooper needs to win, as does Brendan Rodgers. I'd say on the balance of it, maybe Leicester is slightly worse in terms of form. But that said, Maddison, he can turn it on. So potentially, you just need those moments of brilliance from him to maybe help them get a win, but it'll only prolong what potentially is the inevitable for Brendan Rodgers, to be fair, down the line. So I'll get Andy's thoughts as well.
I think, is it too early to call it an El Sacchio?
It's just true. It's very true.
It's, obviously with Nottingham Forest, I feel like a lot of their problems are self-inflicted. They've done what I do, a football manager, is basically sign about 20 odd players and expect it to work. Which maybe a football manager, even that takes a little bit of time to do, but to do that at Premier League level is risky at best. And I think Steve Cooper, I think he is a good manager, but I feel like he's been hamstrung a little bit by having to incorporate virtually a whole new squad of players. And I think what's been really worrying for Nottingham Forest is that they've they've had a couple of games recently where they've taken the lead, against like Fulham and Bournemouth as notable examples. Teams that are going to be in and around them in the table, nonetheless. And they've really, fucked it, for the technical term, with the last 20 minutes of games. And I think with Leicester as well, I think they're in a lot of trouble. There's a lot of, obviously, there seems to be a lot of discontent, off the pitch as well, which more often than not manifests itself to what happens on the pitch. And I think with Leicester, I think apparently, it's going to cost them a lot of money to pay off Brendan Rodgers. So it might be a marriage of convenience, but I think they will get to a point where the cost of sacking Brendan Rodgers will be a lot less than the cost of not being in the Premier League if it gets to that level. I think, but in any game where both teams need a win, it's going to be a draw.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. These are, as we kind of alluded to, the two teams at the bottom. Nottingham Forest in 19th on 4 points. Leicester in 20th on 1 point. Jesus Christ, they've conceded 22 goals in 7 games. It is just ugly reading for the Foxes. Sorry, guys. So, as I said, Liverpool take on Brighton on Saturday. We have Fulham taking on Newcastle, Southampton against Everton, Palace taking on Chelsea at Selhurst Park. That'll be a really interesting game, I think. Bournemouth taking on Brentford, West Ham versus Wolves. God, West Ham need a win as well. Those are two teams that need a win. And we have Leeds taking on Aston Villa. That is the Premier League weekend. It's so good that it's back. I think I read a stat, I think this counts as a stat, that there are only 5 days in October where there is not a Premier League game on. So, guys, we are heading into a busy bloody month. And all you have to think is that by the end of this month, we are going to know a lot about teams. We are going to know who are the contenders, who is really in trouble. This month is going to make or break so many teams. And I'm expecting Arsenal to massively be one of them. I'm not going to say which way, but we're going to be one of them. Guys, I think we're finished for today. That is the show. As always, please follow us on Instagram at Anglo-Italian Pod, on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Match with us on LinkedIn. Match with us definitely isn't the right word. I have it in Italian. Collegare with us on
Connect with us on LinkedIn. That's the
Connect. That's the word. Connect with us on LinkedIn and everything else. Follow us on TikTok as well. That's Andy's domain. Follow us on TikTok. Do it. But for now, guys, anything to say before I send us off with our quote of the week?
No, but just to say, I cannot wait for Monday night's review when we'll be talking about all of these games as well, in depth, probably. So, yeah, I cannot wait.
Cannot wait. Hopefully, me with a big old smile on my face. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. So, guys, I'm going to say farewell. And this week's quote comes from Iranian international Sardar Azmoun. On his Instagram this week, he posted, "The ultimate punishment is to be kicked out of the national team, which is a small price to pay for even a single strand of Iranian women's hair. Shame on you for easily killing the people, and viva women of Iran." See you next week, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Golazo!